The U.S. Navy has one of the best world-class destroyer ships around the world. However, not all U.S. combat ships have top-notch build or quality. The LCS ships may be their worst nightmare. The Littoral Combat ship, or the LCS for short, was supposed to be the Ferrari of naval ships. They were designed to be fast, nimble, versatile, and crewed by a small team. Unfortunately, that is not what the LCS program turned out to be. The LCS ships were a huge disappointment, which were plagued with mishaps and malfunctions. Everything that the Littoral ships were supposed to do ended up being a disaster. Every task that these ships were assigned to do went wrong one way or the other. No American naval ship in recent memory has been subject to more criticism than the LCS. Some members of the Congress even called it a fleet of lemon ships. The U.S. Navy announced in 2022 that it would decommission 9 Freedom-class Littoral Combat ships, some of which are practically brand new. This has left people wondering if these retiring fleet of lemon ships would be used for anything else, or are they just pieces of expensive junk? These 9 ships are the USS Little Rock, USS Coronado, USS Montgomery, USS Sioux City, USS Detroit, USS Fort Worth, USS Milwaukee, USS Independence, and USS Freedom. The problem that was found with these ships was that they were suffering from structural defects that had led to hull cracks on several vessels, limiting the speed and sea states in which some ships can operate, according to internal records obtained by Navy Times and confirmed Sea Service officials. Omaha, a $440 million LCS commissioned in 2018, was turned into a training vessel as it was one of those ships that suffered cracks. An order was issued which prohibited Omaha from traveling faster than 15 knots/17 miles per hour. Documents obtained by the Navy Times warn that the cracks on these ships could grow if they transit faster than 15 knots in seas with maximum wave heights of about 8 feet. After 20 years, the only impressive thing about the LCS program is the massive amount of taxpayers' money it wasted. At first, the LCS program seemed quite promising. The Navy began shaping the plan of action in the 1990s. It started with the idea of creating a versatile ship which could get into hard-to-reach areas. Another selling point for the government was that it would be inexpensive and would only need a small crew. However, neither of those promises were kept. On November 1, 2001, the U.S. Navy announced it would build a small, fast, and stealthy Littoral Combat ship. They built 2 classes, the Independence class and the Freedom class. Little did they know that the Independence class would become rusty and the Freedom class would break down. A lot more than a Navy ship should. The Independence class Littoral Combat ships were made from aluminum and suffered from aggressive corrosion in 2011. Though that issue was sorted out, in May 2022, more problems popped up. It was revealed that the Independence class suffered from class-wide structural defects that lead to hull cracks on many of the ships, limiting the speed and sea states in which some ships could operate. On the other hand, the Freedom-class ships, which rely on a combined diesel and gas propulsion system, suffered from serious class-wide issues with the combining gear system. Many of them broke down while underway and had to be towed back. The modular concept of the Littoral Combat ship that appealed to the Navy officials. The plug-and-play modules could easily be swapped between missions. Each ship would be like a box of Legos. The frame of the ship would be consistent, but based on what a specific mission called for, different modules could be plugged into the ship's hull. The ship would then become modified for the mission at hand. The modules could be equipment containers, anti-submarine sensors, countermeasure equipment, or even mine detectors. This sounds amazing in theory, but in reality the problems that this modular system faced were crazy. Before the problems started, the LCS were hyped up to be a fighter. It was claimed to be capable of going up against larger ships with ease. It would also be able to infiltrate harbors and difficult-to-reach waterways because of its size. But nothing of the sort ever happened, and all these ships did were to carry out basic missions. So basically, millions of dollars were spent for these ships, which were capable of doing nothing special. Cascading delays and cost overruns successfully launched the price tag to $550 million per ship, which is more than twice the initial estimates. The operating costs were worse, estimated to be $70 million per ship per year. As a comparison, the workhorse of the U.S. Navy, the Arleigh Burke destroyer, costs $81 million to operate annually. At this time, the U.S. Navy was tired of this crap, and it decided to stop throwing good money at a piece of junk. That's why almost half of the LCS ships have or will be decommissioned prematurely. Sean Stackley, Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Research, Development and Acquisition, said, "The experience of LCS, it broke the Navy." He meant that literally. Now that most of the LCS combat ships have been decommissioned, what is going to happen to them? Well, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade and sell it for a profit. Admiral Mark Gilday, Chief of Naval Operations, testifying before the Senate Appropriations Committee Defense Subcommittee, suggested the panel assess the possibility of transferring the ships to allied countries in South America where the LCS could perform counter-drug operations. While the mechanical issues were a factor in the decommissioning decision, Gilday argued that a bigger factor was the lack of sufficient warfighting capability against a peer competitor like China, especially the warfare package that was being developed for the Freedom-class hull ended up dead in water. Gilday added, "I refuse to put an additional dollar against a system that would not be able to track a high-end submarine in today's environment." These ships are maintained by contractors, which is extremely costly as opposed to Navy sailors doing that work. But which South American nation would be that crazy to want to spend half of their yearly defense budget on maintaining and operating a fleet of undergunned ships that will break down every other day? The South American Navy's reaction to this proposal was comedic. First, they were shocked, but after a quick look, they declined immediately. Even though not a single country wants these ships, there's got to be something good that would come out of these ships. Probably. Lieutenant Brian Adornado of the U.S. Navy Reserve has some suggestions. For example, turning one LCS into a self-defense test ship. A ship where numerous technologies and weapons are tested on. Anything ranging from biofuels to lasers. These ships can be operated by remote control, because at times they fire live missiles toward the ship to test its defensive system. And before doing this, the crew leave the rest ship before via helicopter. However, these missiles are not targeted towards the test ship. Instead, they are targeting a decoy barge that's being pulled 150 feet behind the test ship. You know, just in case something goes wrong like always. The ex-Paul F. Foster destroyer currently fills the role of the test ship, however, she's almost 50 years old. Since the LCS is heavily automated, converting it to a remotely piloted vessel would be relatively easier. Another suggestion is to use the LCS as a helicopter landing ship to train the new pilots like the Baylander, which was used to train pilots to land. In its lifetime, it has set a record of 346 landings in a single day. However, in 2011, the Baylander was struck from the naval records and sold. It's now a floating restaurant in New York City. Looks like her fate was predetermined. Keeping the Littoral Combat ships running will require a lot of maintenance and much more cash. Each of these ships is planned to be transferred to the reserve fleet, where the U.S. Navy pays about $500,000 in operation and maintenance costs per year. If the ship is to be in ready reserve, the Navy has to pay the Maritime Administration about $10 million per ship per year, which is too much for a ship that has been deactivated. In the early 1990s, the U.S. Navy activated 78 ships from the reserve fleet as part of Operation Desert Shield/Desert Storm to transport equipment to the Persian Gulf. However, more than 60% of those ships failed to meet the required schedule because of their poor condition. So basically, these ready reserves are fancier and extremely expensive old-age homes for ships that are in reserve. However, the LCS are here to stay and will keep on using the taxpayers' money whether they do anything or not. Even recycling them will be costly. So the LCS is a problem even in their retirement. So if you ever find yourself on a Littoral Combat ship by chance, don't forget to bring lots of books or other activities, because if you break down, you could be there for a while. So what do you think of the LCS? Should these ships be put to better use? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.